Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. My name is Pratik and I'll be discussing the news today for 9th of September. So here are the headlines. First, Russia's mRNA vaccine shows 100% success in preclinical trials for cancer. Here we'll talk about the mRNA technology and what exactly are the challenges and benefits of using them. Second news, we'll talk about France to appoint 5th Prime Minister in less than 2 years. So here we'll discuss the fragile political system of that is used by France, and we'll also compare that with that of India as well. Third, India's space economy is projected to grow fivefold by 2033. So here we'll discuss the drivers and the trend with respect to space economy growth in India, and we'll discuss how it is utilized for the socio-economic growth in the country and what challenges it faces. In the fourth news, we'll talk about Israel becomes the first OECD country to sign bilateral investment treaty with India. So here we'll discuss the whole idea of BIT and what exactly are the further ways in which India and Israel are going to have more relation. And in the last news, we'll talk about world needs fair, transparent trade system as mentioned by the External Affairs Minister of India. Here we'll discuss the various disruptions in the global trade infrastructure or in the ecosystem and what can be done by India to overcome those issues. Then we have certain quick updates, and in the place and news we'll be discussing the Nepal, where Gen Z protest due to social media ban has happened, and it has also led to revocation of the ban on social media. So let's start with the first news, which is Russia's mRNA vaccine Enteromix shows 100% success in preclinical trials. This topic is from Science and Technology, GS paper 3. And it is an extremely important and significant news because as of now, there is no cure for cancer or there is no vaccination for cancer, right? And interestingly, very recently, US government and especially the health secretary of US, Robert Kennedy, has put a plug on the federal government's funding on the research on cancer, especially through our mRNA technology. So here what is interesting is that the results are very promising. The vaccine has managed to shrink the tumors and it has also slowed the growth of the cancer. In fact, it has found safe for repeated use, and more importantly, it has used mRNA technology platform to trigger immune response against cancer. At the same time, there are certain concerns as well. So the sample size of this trial is very less. It is in fact around 30 or 40 only. So we do not know for a larger chunk of population or a larger sample size whether it will hold or not. So first is in terms of the sample size. Second, the report is also not peer reviewed. So we also do not totally understand the efficacy of the result. Okay. So these are some of the challenges as well, but as more data comes and more results are tested through the phase 1 and phase 2 trials, perhaps we'll get more information about this. What is more important from the exam perspective is what exactly is the mRNA technology. So if you look at the mRNA vaccines, they basically use mRNA technology, and there is a specific way in which they operate. So what they do is they use mRNA, which is messenger RNA, to instruct cells to produce a viral protein, which is antigen. So first you should understand how our immune system of the body works. So in general, what happens is if any foreign substance enters in our body, be it a virus or a bacteria, then an immune system is triggered in the body wherein all the foreign substances are attacked by our immune system. So if our immune system is working well, then why is the need for vaccination at all? So the reason why we need vaccine is because it takes time for the immune system to realize which components are the foreign invaders and to what extent they should be destroyed. So basically, vaccine development or through vaccination, our immune system gets more hands-on practice in terms of identifying and attacking these foreign entities, right? So in terms of various vaccine development, there are two ways in which it is traditionally developed. First is in terms of introducing a dead virus or a dead foreign substance, and this which is far less riskier because here the scope of contamination is very less. Then the second way in which the virus can be introduced or vaccine can be introduced is through live attenuated or weakened virus. Then the third approach is through mRNA. The traditional vaccine development used to take tens of years or maybe 8 years, 10 years for to develop. And if you know that during COVID, the entire world was paralyzed by the COVID virus. And because of that, a virus or vaccine had to be developed in a very short span of time. In that perspective, mRNA technology came very handy, and then it was developed using 2 years only, mRNA vaccines were developed. So here the mRNA technology becomes very important because it utilizes a very specific process to increase or improve the way in which the immune system works. So what it does, it basically, every virus has certain proteins towards its outer surface, and it uses this system to attach to any healthy cells, right? So this could be a virus, and this is any healthy cells. So it goes and attaches itself here, and then it starts to replicate. So what happens in mRNA is that mRNA basically targets this outer protuberance, which is called spike. Okay, so basically as per the mRNA, it prompts the protein production that matches up with the parts of the antigen. So in the case of COVID-19 vaccination, the cells would produce spike protein. So this was called spike protein of the coronavirus, and as a result of that, they became competent to repel the COVID viruses, right? So essentially, this is the process of how the mRNA vaccines work, but there are certain challenges and benefits as well. So in terms of benefits, as we had discussed earlier as well, it is essentially a very leads to very rapid development because it can be designed quickly once the virus's genetic sequence is known. This can be done through DNA sequencing and understanding the composition of the spike protein that it attaches with itself with the cell of the healthy body. Second is it provides for a strong immune response. They stimulate both antibody and T cell immunity for comprehensive protection. And thirdly, it does not require any live virus. Why? And this leads to reduction of risk of causing diseases while maintaining effectiveness. So because of use of live attenuated viruses or weak viruses, sometimes it does lead to some side effects as well. So these are some of the benefits of mRNA vaccines. When it comes to the challenges, it is not bereft of challenges. There are certain challenges as well. The first challenge is in terms of storage requirements, because these vaccines require to be stored in extremely cold situation. Thereby, the storage and the supply becomes extremely difficult. Secondly, it has short-term side effects, including vomiting, nausea, headache, etc., which may appear to be very devastating in the short term. Thirdly, there is problem with respect to analyzing the long-term safety because they are relatively newer in nature, so we do not know to what extent they can be relied in the long term. So this is all about the mRNA vaccines. If you look at the question that UPSC asked from this theme, in the prelims of 2022, UPSC asked a question whereby you had to answer about all these aspects. The first statement was about Serum Institute of India produced COVID-19 vaccine named Covishield using mRNA platform. So this is not correct. It was not using mRNA platform. And Sputnik V vaccine is manufactured using vector-based platform. This is correct. Third, Covaxin is an inactivated pathogen-based vaccine. This is also correct. Right answer is B, 2 and 3 only. Then in terms of mains, they had also asked a question related to the same theme, where they have asked what is the basic principle behind vaccine development. So you should know about all the way in which vaccine works and the kind of immune response, how it works, and all the defense mechanism that it has. Then how do vaccines work? and what approaches were adopted by India or Indian vaccine manufacturers to produce COVID-19 vaccine. So very practical questions, and it was very much covered in the news as well. Let's go to the next topic, which is France to appoint 5th Prime Minister in less than 2 years. And this is part of GS2 polity. So we have a topic called comparing of Indian constitution with that of other countries. So here we talk about the constitutional framework. We talk about how several important constitutional functionaries like president, like prime ministers are appointed, in what way they are different, or in terms of their functioning and in terms of their appointment. So we'll take a look at this. So first of all, we'll talk about the way in which there is similarity between India and France in terms of the political system that they have. So first thing is that both of them are republican, or they have a republican form of government. Now, what is the meaning of republican form of government? It means that the head of the state is not hereditary in nature. So it basically pertains to the head of the state. It basically pertains to the sovereignty of the country. And here, important thing is it is elected. They are not they are not hereditary like in the UK. So in United Kingdom, it is hereditary in nature, but in terms of both France and both India, they have elected heads of state. Even though there is difference in the manner of election, we'll get into that as well, but they have a republican form of government where the head of states are elected. So in India, we have the head of state as the president is called the head of the state, and the prime minister is basically the head of government. Okay, so this is the distinction that you should know, right? Because sometimes UPSC can also confuse you regarding this as well, head of state versus head of government. So primarily what it means that this is nominal in nature in Indian case, which means that it is symbolic, right? And the actual power of the government resides with the Council of Ministers headed by the PM. So it is largely real power. Okay, so this is in case of India, but in case of France, there's a difference. We'll discuss about it very shortly. Secondly, they have a bicameral legislature. Both of them has bicameral legislature. In India, we have Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and also the same thing is there in France as well. They have a lower house and upper house. Third, it is based on the principles of democracy. So the value system, apart from the structural parts as well, there is similarities in terms of values. So in terms of the principle of democracy that is followed in both of these countries, and specifically they virtue or they favor or emphasize on the principles of liberty. Liberty can be both positive liberty or negative liberty. So tell me how positive liberty is different from negative liberty. In fact, UPSC one time also asked a question on this as well, and what kind of liberty India essentially follows, right? So both of them provide for liberty. Then equality. So in terms of equality, you have equality of opportunity, you have equality of outcome, and then we have fraternity in terms of the sense of brotherhood or sisterhood, right? So these are the value system that are common in both India and in France. Now let us take a look at the value or the political system, the aspects which makes them different. And this is something which is more important as far as exam is concerned, because UPSC had asked about critical evaluation of some of these features, right? So if you look at the constitutional model, the very first difference is that India follows what is called parliamentary republic, right? Which means that we have a single executive led by PM, right? And the president, even though there is an office of president, but this is largely ceremonial or nominal in nature. On the other hand, France has what is called as semi-presidential form of government or democracy, and it has a concept of dual executive. In dual executive, both president and prime minister have several or different set of powers. And what is important here is that in France, particularly, you have executive, you have legislature, and you have judiciary, just like in India. But in executive, you have two forms. You have one headed by the president, and then you have head of or the prime minister, one headed by prime minister. So essentially, both of them have certain functions. So president is also elected in nature. It is not, it is directly elected, and prime minister is also directly elected, and they both have major powers. External power essentially lies with the president, and most of the internal matters lie with the prime minister. Prime minister is responsible to the legislature, just like in India, right? So this is the basic thing here. And sometimes it happens that both president and prime minister are from the same party. But it is also possible that there is a president who is from a different party and prime minister who is from different party. In such cases, there's a concept called cohabitation, which is used to describe the political system of France, particularly when the president and prime minister are from different parties. So it essentially tells how exactly they are supposed to function and in what ways they should be cooperating, right? So this is about the nature of constitution, or in terms of the kind of republic that these countries have. Secondly, in terms of the procedure to elect the prime minister, the president, in India, we know that it is done through indirect election, and it is done through an electoral college consisting using the single transferable vote and secret ballot. On the other hand, it is for the in terms of France, the election is done through direct election by universal adult suffrage. So it is not done by an electoral college, but people themselves take part in the election. For example, Emmanuel Macron became the president in 2017 through a widespread campaign in 2007 and also in the recent terms as well. Then thirdly, in terms of how to choose and remove the prime minister. So in India, the prime minister is elected by the Lok Sabha and must retain the confidence of Lok Sabha. So in terms of France, the prime minister is appointed by the president but must keep assembly's confidence. Okay, so here president can also remove the prime minister in case of France, provided he is from the same party. But in the event of cohabitation, then the prime minister, as long as he or she has the confidence of the legislature, he cannot be removed. In this time itself, when the recent prime minister of France was removed, it was not because that the president of France had removed him, but it was because the party could not have the confidence of the lower house. Next, in terms of federal design, India essentially is a federal system, and some of the scholars like Casey Ware has described India as quasi-federal. Why? Because center apparently has more power compared to the states. But Dr. Ambedkar described India as a federal system only, where all the major aspects of federal system, such as having two sets of government and their power to be prescribed in the constitution, and because of the fact that India has an independent judiciary, all those mechanisms essentially attribute to the fact that India has a federal system, but some commentators also call India as a quasi-federal system as well. When it comes to France, it is a unitary country, which means that it is centralized with local government as central agents. Now, the primary reason why India is a federal country and France is a unitary country is because of the fact that France is not as large and diverse as that of India. Then, when it comes to secularism, India has a positive approach, and when where in the state can maintain neutrality but can intervene to reform. So secularism is the concept where you describe the relationship between the citizens on one hand and state on the other hand. During the medieval period, state had a very strong role to play in the politics, especially in the European affairs. So because of that reason, there was an agreement reached where state and the religious, the church will no longer interfere in their each other's domain. So that was known as a strict wall of separation, and in France this term was called as laïcite, right? So here it was strict separation of religion and politics, which means that state will not interfere in the affairs of the religion and vice versa. But in India's case, state does interfere in some of the aspects of religion, especially to reform it. For example, banning of untouchability or abolition of the instant triple talaq can be considered as some of the aspects of India's positive nature of secularism. If you look at some of the questions that have come from this topic, this is a very important topic in the sense that 2 questions have come directly from this. So in the year 2022, the question was on critically examine the procedures through which the President of India and France are elected. So we have discussed the procedure for that. In India it is done through an electoral college and it is indirect in nature, and in terms of France it is directly elected through universal adult franchise. Now why it is done like that? It is because of the nature of the political system, right? Then what can France learn from Indian constitution's approach to secularism? This was asked in 2019 when the hijab ban controversy was at its peak. Therefore, a lot of scholars or commentators had commented that perhaps it's time for France to look into the secular practices that it commits, right? So this is all about the second topic. Let's move to this third topic, which is India's space economy is projected to grow at 5-fold by 2033. This is from a report published by CII and KPMG. And this, of course, is part of science and technology. In fact, space technology is directly mentioned as part of the syllabus of GS paper 3. So if you look more into the news, currently the size of space economy in India is about $8.4 billion, and it is projected to grow 5-fold. So 5 times 8 is 40. So it is going to be more than 40 billion or about 44 billion in 2033 in just 7 or 8 years, 9 years. Drivers, state enabled. So what are the drivers that will help the space economy to grow? Is it going to grow only through the traditional means? No. It has to be working towards actual monetizing of its resources, right? So for that, satellite-enabled services have to be provided, and it needs to be working through the export-based model. So satellite-based initiative can be in terms of providing the Earth observation data or Earth observation. So this can be extremely helpful in disaster management, in agriculture, in navigation, and also for regional navigation can be given. Apart from other aspects, right? For example, space launches can be there. So the primary thrust of this initiative is to enable these services and monetize it, and especially promote its exports. When it comes to the global share, the target is to rise, which is close to 2% as of now in terms of the entire space economy, to about 8% by 2033. Now let's take a look at the key trends that essentially they are targeting. So first is they want to move from the core space tech. So again, as we discussed, core space tech will be about the launching of satellites, about the launch vehicles, etc. And it is going to, the change is to monetize the downstream services. For example, the Earth observation, satellite communication, navigation, which can be applied in telecommunication, agriculture, disaster management, urban planning, infrastructure, etc. Then what are the growth drivers of this trend? First, there is private sector boom where more than 200 startups are innovating, and especially in the space sector, provided by the ecosystem that Government of India has created in this regard. Then there is institutional reforms, which we'll talk about in space, is consolidating the demand and creating the ecosystem for it. Then government is integrating it towards taking the space inputs, linking it with government's platforms. Example, we have Bhunidhi portal. So some of the initiative we can discuss here. And then there are challenges as well. So if you look at some of the challenges for space economy, one of the major challenge is that there is limited global reach. For example, India has this satellite, this IRNSS, Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, which is also referred to as NAVIC. It is limited to regional use of barely 1,500 kilometers. So India needs, if it wants to be recognized globally, it needs to enhance this reach as well. And for this, it requires a lot of technological and funding as well. So both technical and financial aspects needs to be worked upon. Then with respect to the Earth observation data market, there is very low awareness in terms of how it can be utilized, and there is also very weak innovation. The demand is fragmented. There is no single source of bulk demand that is coming up, which will help this whole sector. Third, when it comes to private sector, even though India has prioritized and has encouraged the private sector to invest in the research and development, still it requires high capital, therefore, and long incubation. Therefore, the private sector has limited reach here. Then when it comes to workforce shortage, it is also one of the challenge here, because there is skills mismatch and there is also brain drain. Then there is tax and regulatory gap with respect to the unpredictability of GST. Sometimes it can, there is very problematic in terms of the rate slabs, and then there is digital tax, PPP revenue sharing hurdles. So all these general problems that any manufacturing or industrial sector face, they're also being witnessed by the space economy as well. Then when it comes to the other concern, there is issue of security, there is issue of rising space debris, which can be some of the challenging aspects for this prospect. When it comes to some of the initiatives that India has taken for development of space economy, we can take a look at the Indian Space Policy 2023, wherein it enables end-to-end participation of the private sector or the non-government entities in all the domains of space activities. Secondly, there is New Space India Limited, NSIL, which acts as ISRO's commercial arm, promoting and commercializing its products and services, very essential part to monetize its resources. And other initiatives include 100% permission in FDI and 1,000 crore venture capital funds, etc. This we can mention as some of the initiatives to monetize space economy. Now the question comes, how can space be used for the socio-economic development? And this is precisely what UPSC asked in 2016, that discuss India's achievements in the field of space technology, space science and technology, how the application of this technology has helped India in its socio-economic development. So in this part, you can talk about the various initiatives undertaken in agriculture, in disaster management, in insurance, crop insurance, and in terms of regional navigation, etc. All these aspects can be mentioned. Next topic, Israel becomes first OECD country to sign bilateral investment agreement with India. This can be covered as part of GS Paper 2, International Relations. So India and any other important country relations are important from exam perspective. And the concept of BIT, or Bilateral Investment Treaty, is extremely important from economy perspective, right? So this news was there because after several years, like the last time the BIT was instituted by India was in 1990s, and then it expired in 2016 with Israel. And after years of negotiation, in fact 9 years of negotiation, finally we have settled with a BIT with Israel. This is why it is important. So firstly, we need to understand what exactly is the concept of BIT, or Bilateral Investment Treaty. So suppose you are an investor from Israel or maybe from Italy, and you want to invest in Israel. So you want to ensure that the government does not unfairly or make or take away your resources, your factories, or if there's a dispute between you and a local firm, government should be impartial, right? So because of that, this basically investment treaty is done to ensure that whatever short-term and especially the long-term investment treaties are safeguarded. So the purpose of bilateral investment treaty essentially is to safeguard the investment done by any foreign entity. Secondly, it also provides for more predictability, and this allows for more investment in any country which has this BIT mechanism. So in terms of the legal understanding, so what exactly it is, a reciprocal legal agreement. So it cannot be one way or unilateral. Both country has to extend reciprocal legal agreement. It is concluded between two sovereign states for the promotion and protection of investments by each other's territories. In terms of international law, BITs come with within section or article 38 clause 1 subclause A statute of the International Court of Justice as the primary source of obligations under public international law. And India approved the model BIT text in 2015, which replaced Indian model BIT 1993. Interestingly, when India started with the LPG reforms in 1991, India had adopted a very progressive BIT in 1990s, right? In 1993. But because of that progressive nature, India saw that it was misused and misdirected by several entities like Kane Energy and other entities. And as a result of that, India lost a lot of foreign capital. Because of that, India started with another level of the BIT, which was slightly more complex in nature, right? And as a result of that, a lot of countries started to revoke the BIT status. Then India had to reform the BIT again, and then in 2015, India basically started with a model BIT. Now this model BIT essentially tried to harmonize the reforms or the state or the protection of the investor on one hand, and also the state control on the other hand. So essentially, it neither gave state too much power, or it also did not provide less protection to the investor. Essentially, it was a balanced approach. Because of that, you'll see that now India is signing a lot of BITs with other countries, and more recently with Uzbekistan in 2024, with UAE in 2024, and with Kyrgyzstan in 2025. Now with the BIT with Israel is significant because it is an OECD country, and there is a potential for huge trade and investment. So if you look at some of the features of the India-Israel BIT, first, definitely it is going to boost investment, but in what sense? As of now, the investment is not very huge. It is only 800 million, which is set to rise because now the investors will feel safe and secure to invest in India. Second, as it will be providing investor protection, ensures minimum standards of treatment while preserving states' regulatory rights. So this is basically the crux of India's model BIT. Third, there is provision for dispute resolution, provides arbitration mechanism to support trade and investment growth. Next, we'll also need to look into how this ties with the larger India-Israel relations. So India and Israel have recently seen a very growth in relations, not just in any one sector, but in multiple sectors. So if you look at the economic relation, the bilateral trade is currently at $6.5 billion. And the good thing is that India has export surplus, right? So it is favorable for India. Secondly, if you come to the regional cooperation, they cooperate through I2U2 partnership, which is also called West Asian Quad. So here the members are India, Israel, UAE, and US. The first summit was held in 2022. Then they are also cooperating when it comes to innovation and science and technology. And for this, there was I4 fund that was launched for industrial R&D and innovation. Then in terms of defense cooperation, there is cooperation with Barak 8 missile co-development, and regional naval port calls in Haifa. When it comes to other areas, we have cultural exchanges, health and medicine, and more important, there is cooperation with agriculture, especially in drip irrigation, and also with water management, where India can learn a lot from Israel, where it uses uses the waste management very well, especially the use of grey water. So this is all about the evolving cooperation between India and Israel. Next news is about the statement made by External Affairs Minister on the sidelines of the BRICS virtual summit. So what exactly was the statement? That world needs fair, transparent trade system. Okay, so this is part of international relations. First, it is important because of the need for reform of the global multilateral trading system. Secondly, because BRICS is involved. So all the groupings are also important from the exam perspective. So context we have discussed already. It is because in the virtual BRICS summit convened recently to discuss the global trade disruption, essentially it was headed, or it was conducted by Brazil. And here the External Affairs Minister stressed that the economic practices must be fair and transparent. So first of all, let's talk about the emerging challenges in global trade, where the most important challenge that it is being faced is protectionism. So protectionism essentially is one of the way in which the countries try to protect their domestic industry. In fact, if done in moderation, it is not exactly a bad thing. For a lot of countries, protectionism was used as a tool. In fact, India also promoted protectionism during, especially after independence, so that its native industries could grow. And at that point of time, it was not that competitive to take on with the global giants. But after 1991 reforms, India started to slowly open its economy so that it can, the sectors can also compete with the other international players. But if any major country uses protectionism, then it's a problematic thing, because the countries has already achieved a certain level of success, and it does not require to provide its domestic industrial base any sort of protection. In fact, this protectionism by the advanced country or by the developed countries inevitably harm the interest of the global south. Especially when it comes to US, it has imposed 50% tariffs on not just India but also on Brazil. It also weakens the WTO system, which calls for a fair and rational tax system. Secondly, it is also weakening the multilateralism, where the WTO, especially the dispute resolution mechanism, is still paralyzed because they have most of the countries have not yet provided for the membership or appointment of the dispute resolution bodies. And then UN is also gridlocked, so there is problem with respect to multilateralism. Third, the supply chain fragility because of several global matters such as global COVID-19. It led to supply chain fragility, Ukraine war, sanctions, Red Sea crisis. All of them have led to volatility in trade and energy. Then there are other issues that have also led to challenge in global trade. So for example, the food, energy and fertilizer insecurity in global south, particularly led by the Ukraine war or Russia-Ukraine war. Then extreme climate events and some of the policies of the European Union, such as carbon border adjustment mechanism. Right, so these are some of the ways in which the global trade is facing challenges. Now, in order to hedge these challenges, what measures can India take? So if you look at some of the measures that is proposed for India, so first thing is that we need to diversify our supply chain in terms of where we are getting our products from. Especially there are certain important items that we get, especially for energy security, right? So we need to diversify it. In fact, India did a very smart move when it diversified its energy security essentially from the Middle East to the European countries, especially Russia, right? So here India is not only diversifying for consumption, but it is also diversifying for exports as well. And for that, we can identify several hotspots where we can use our prowess for export. And for this, we have initiatives like Act East, we have initiatives like Quad, which can act as a very important tool for diversifying our export base. Then secondly, we need to push for multilateralism, because this is going to help us revive WTO and UN, because ultimately rule-based order is good for global south, right? Because if WTO is not being operated or not being operationalized, then the powerful countries can make any laws or any things or any decisions on their whims and fancies. In order to prevent this, there has to be some rule-based decision making, and for that, institutions like WTO, institutions like UN need to be reformed. So India need to promote this part as well. Thirdly, we need to refashion trade ties, which means that we need to engage with other countries in a pragmatic way, especially with China and neighborhood. And especially this was seen in the Tianjin declaration recently in China during the SCO summit of the Prime Minister, where he wanted to engage with other countries as well. Then one important thing is that we need to improve upon the Atmanirbharta, so for example, this is going to lead to consumption-based growth. So if you look at the components of GDP, it is C plus I plus X minus M plus G. So C stands for, so GDP basically is component of all these parameters. So C is for consumption, I for investment, G for government expenditure, and this is your net investment, right, or net exports. So India has to work majorly. If the net exports part is compromised, India has to work to strengthen the consumption. And for that, there are two major initiatives which have recently been taken. First is with respect to the reform in the income tax laws, wherein people who have less than 12 lakh income have been spared from giving the or filing the income tax, right? So they are exempted from the tax, direct tax. Then the second thing which has recently been done is to there is revision in the GST where the slabs have been reduced, and that is going to again usher more consumption. So because of increase in consumption, the economy is set to rise. Then there is also for net exports, as this is facing sanctions from US in terms of 50% tariff, maybe we need to diversify it so that it can be offsetted as well, and that is why we need to look for other areas of export. Then at the same time, with respect to self-reliance, we need to improve or get our house in order. For this, we need to ease business so that the bureaucratic hurdles can be avoided, and the policies need to be stable. It should not change overnight. So there should be some predictability as well. Then other measures can be in terms of negotiating FTAs. We have recently concluded some sort of FTA with UK, and we are also negotiating it with EU as well. In fact, we need to broaden our FTA discussion with other countries as well. In fact, we should also go by the bilateral investment treaty that we recently discussed with Israel, right? So we should also try to have discussions with BIT in terms of other countries as well. And more importantly, we should expand exports to new markets. Especially, I would say we should explore Latin American areas as well, because this is something which we have yet to explore. Then when it comes to the global south interest, we should be championing their cause, especially when it comes to their interest with respect to CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, or carbon taxation, or with respect to supply chain infrastructure, or reform of global or multilateralism. So we should not just be supporting or providing our own voice, but we should be a voice of the global south as well. Then let's talk about place in news. And in place in news, we have Nepal. So the news is that Nepal revoked its social media ban. So essentially what happened was the Nepali government has imposed a social media ban because of several reasons, and I'll discuss the reason as well. And as a result, as a response of that ban, a lot of protesters started to demand for revocation of social media ban. This protest became violent, which led to more than death of 19 people, and 300 and more people were injured. And as a result of that, the Home Minister of Nepal resigned, and ultimately the government had to succumb to the demand of the Nepali youth, and then the social media ban was revoked. Now, a lot of critics have been saying that there is a rising trend of revolution and social movement in various parts of South Asia. We have seen this in Pakistan, we have seen this in Myanmar, there is also the same trend is going on in Sri Lanka, and recently we saw that in Bangladesh as well, where there was ouster of Sheikh Hasina government. Now, all these social movement or the counter rebellions which is happening, they all impact India's safety and security. So we need to understand how these countries are situated and what measures we can take to protect and preserve our own national interest. If you look at Nepal in terms of its map, it is of course located in South Asia, and it is a landlocked country. It is sandwiched between India on one hand and China on the other hand. The bordering nations, as we can see, is China on the north and India in south and east and west as well. So in case if I ask you which are the states that border, or which are the Indian states that border China, so the number of states that border China are 5, starting with Uttarakhand, then we have UP, then Bihar, then a small part is also linked or attached or is touched by West Bengal, and finally in this side we have Sikkim as well. So there are 5 states of India that share its border with with Nepal, and the length of the border is close to 1750 kilometers. If you look at some of the areas which are disputed between India and China, it is Lipu Lake, Kalapani, Lumpia Dhura, and then there is Sasta region in Bihar that is also disputed. In fact, recently Nepal also published a map where it depicted all these disputed region as part of its territory, which basically went against the Treaty of Sagoli that was finalized between the then British India and Nepal in 1816. So far we have taken this as de facto political border. Anyway, if you look at the political features, the geographical features, so essentially Nepal has a diversity of geographical features. Towards the north, it has Himalayan mountains, as we all know. It has hills in the center, plains in the south. If you look at the major regions, it has Terai plains, and here there is Madheshi people who live here, and then there are hill people who live towards the Pahad region, and the mountain region is Himal region. So you have Madhesh, you have Pahad, and you have Himal. Then all of us know that the highest point in the world is basically Mount Everest, and it is 8848.86 meter long. Then high major rivers are Kosi, Narayani, which is also called as Gandak, and Karnali. If you look at the notable features, it has 8 of the world's 14 above peaks above 8,000 meter are located in Nepal. In fact, it is also very much culturally important because it is the birthplace of Lord Buddha in Lumbini. Right, so this is what makes Nepal very significant. Next, we'll talk about some quick updates. Starting off, we have the news on Aadhaar. And why this news came into news? Because Supreme Court recently mentioned that Aadhaar has to be one of the documents that the poll panel or the election commission should consider as part of the ongoing SIR practice or revision in Bihar. So essentially what happened was that you all know that SIR is being done in Bihar essentially to revise the electoral rolls to include for all the eligible beneficiary and to remove all the non-eligible beneficiaries, right? But the challenge is that there are the 11 documents which the Election Commission of India has provided for in terms of knowing the identity of the people. they are extremely difficult to get, especially for the people who are socially and economically marginalized. Therefore, a bunch of petition has been filed on behalf of those people to make sure that they do not get excluded from the upcoming assembly election in Bihar in November. So Supreme Court has given the Aadhaar as one of the document that they can submit as part of or proof of their identity. So Supreme Court had said that Aadhaar is going to be a proof of identity, yes, but it will not be considered as a proof of citizenship. So this is very important in this perspective. So if you look at what exactly is Aadhaar, Aadhaar, as we all know, is a 12-digit number issued by a body called Unique Identification Authority of India. This project, as you may or may not know, it was started by a gentleman called Nandan Nilekani, who basically spearheaded this initiative, and later on government started to double down on this, the NDA government, and finally the Aadhaar was rolled out. So what it contains not just the demographic details, but it also contains biometric details. So just like there is social security numbers which you'll find in countries like United States, Aadhaar essentially was like a unique identifier in India. So it contains your name, gender, date of birth, address, and biometric details such as fingerprint, iris scan, and facial photograph data. At the same time, there was a controversy earlier that to what extent Aadhaar can be made compulsory for the government to provide certain benefits. So this was resolved in a very important case called Puttaswamy judgment in 2018. So you may know this as the case that provided for right to privacy as one of the fundamental rights under Article 21. So it also said that the Aadhaar is going to be constitutional validity. It is essentially for providing welfare schemes and government services. So government is competent to use Aadhaar as a data or as an instrument to identify people so that there is no inclusion or exclusion error. And in fact, the Section 7 of the Aadhaar Act provides that government may require Aadhaar for beneficiaries to access benefits or subsidies under schemes funded by the consolidated fund of not just India but also the states. And the Supreme Court has also mentioned that the Aadhaar metadata cannot be stored beyond 6 months. So basically it is for a very specific provision for identification. And once that task is done, government should remove that data from its database. And this is essentially part of right to privacy. Fine. So let's now move to the next topic, which is Engineering Exports Promotion Council. So this institution recently celebrated its Platinum Jubilee, and Platinum Jubilee basically happens when any organization completes its 70 years of existence. Okay, so in this context, the President of India has urged the citizens to make India a global hub of business and knowledge. Okay, so if you look at what exactly is EEPC, it was established in 1955, so this makes for the 70 years of EEPC, and it is under Ministry of Commerce. If you look at the members of EEPC, it is mostly SMEs or MSMEs. Close to 60% of the members are these small, medium enterprises. It is registered in Kolkata, where its headquarters is also there. What exactly is the activity or what does it perform? It basically advise government to promote what exactly can be done to promote exports, where can the destination be. For example, we were talking about how India needs to promote exports in the light of several disruptions in the global trade supply. So in that case, the agency which is mandated to advise government on promoting and expanding and diversifying the export is this body, Engineering Exports Promotion Council, right? Apart from that, it also support upgradation of technologies, especially because it is important that we provide for more value-added products. Third, it also provides for credit facilitation, especially to the medium, small, and micro enterprises. Then what is exactly its goal? Its goal is to boost India's global competitiveness and achieve higher engineering export targets. Next news is on Universal Post Union, UPU, where there was a very important development that happened, that Union Minister of Communication recently unveiled the UPI UPU integration aimed at transforming cross-border remittances. So basically, we know that the postal bodies are very secure and they are very trusted in nature, and UPI provides for faster and seamless integration or services. So basically, this is an attempt to combine or synergize the benefits of both the postal services and the faster services provided by UPI. So this is what has been done. And if you look at UPU, which is Universal Postal Union, it was established in 1874. It's a very old organization, and it became a specialized agency of the Union in 1948. Its headquarters is Bern, Switzerland, and it is the second oldest international organization after ITU, or International Telecommunication Union, and it was established in 1865. So if a question comes that UPU is the oldest organization, then you can safely make that or mark that wrong, because it is ITU which is the oldest international organization. Then the members are 192, including India. What are the functions of UPU? It is first primary forum for cooperation between the postal sector of different players of different countries, right? For example, Indian Post will be cooperating with postal country of a different country. Secondly, it helps to ensure a universal network of up-to-date products and services. From time to time, the postal services have improved and it has diversified its operation as well. So it basically keeps a track of all such developments and spreads awareness and knowledge to member countries. Next, we'll discuss about Ullas, which is understanding of lifelong learning for all in society. And this was in news because Himachal Pradesh was declared as the 5th state/UT to achieve full functional literacy after Tripura, Mizoram, Goa, and Ladakh under the Nav Bharat Saksharta Karyakram, also known as Ullas. So this Himachal Pradesh became fully literate, fully functional literate. So when Himachal Pradesh started off, it did not have literacy of more than 25%, but it's a very welcoming news that it has now achieved a full functional literacy. In fact, more than 99% of the people are literate here. And if you look at the whole approach here, is that it is based on the National Education Policy of 2020, and the approach here is not education for everyone. So what we generally consider education is that it is merely for the benefit of the school children and for the college student in terms of higher education. But education itself is a lifelong pursuit, and it should not be just equated with school or college education. In fact, it should be for lifelong education. And there are several people who have been left out from the education system, and therefore this initiative called Ullas was launched so that people who have, or especially the adults who were not part of the formal education system, could be educated. And for that, the government had also incorporated several communities so that they can go and teach them as well. And it essentially talks about whole of society approach, right? So what exactly is Ullas? Ullas is a centrally sponsored scheme called New India Literacy Program under Ministry of Education. It was for 5 years from 2022 to 2027, and the aim is to empower all adults aged 15 years and above who have not had the opportunity to educate themselves. It allows one to acquire reading, writing, and numeracy skills and critical life skills too. Okay. Let's move on to the next news, which is about Pelas's cat. So a wildlife survey by the WWF India has captured the first photo of Pelas's cat in Arunachal Pradesh. So it is if you look at the image of this cat, it is very different from the normal household cat. It is essentially a wild cat, and uh, it inhabits rocky steppes, mountain, grasslands across Central Asia, including Iran, Afghanistan, Mongolia, Russia, Pakistan, and northern India. And if you look at the eyes of this, it is in generally the eyes of normal cat is very thin, right? And here it is more dilated in nature, and it is also called as the most expressive cats. Okay, and if you look at the scientific name of this, which is Ottocolobus manual, which essentially roughly translate to ugly ears, right? So essentially when it was discovered first by the gentleman called Pallas's, so Pallas's cat essentially takes from the name of its discoverer. So he named it as per or thinking of it that its ears are very ugly in nature, right? So if you look at the physical feature, it has a 30 to 35 centimeter tall with a very dense fur coat, and its diet is small prey, including marmots, pikas, ground squirrels, voles, etc. And in terms of conservation status, it is of least concern on IUCN Red List. But when it comes to the Wildlife Protection Act of India, it is given under the highest protection under Schedule 1. Fine, so this is all about Pallas's cat. Where it was discovered, it was seen in Arunachal Pradesh. So what it indicates that we know very limited information about the wildlife status when it comes to various territories. Okay. Then second is about Mahadevi Wildlife Sanctuary. So recently Supreme Court stayed projects in Mahadevi Wildlife Sanctuary, which is a proposed tiger reserve as well. So about this wildlife sanctuary particularly, it was proclaimed a wildlife sanctuary in 1999 under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So basically what happens when particular conservation status is given to a wildlife sanctuary, it enhances its conservation status. Then its location is North Goa along the Western Ghat. It borders Karnataka and Maharashtra. And this river, Mondovi River, flows through the wildlife sanctuary. Often UPSC asks which river flows through a particular sanctuary. So essentially this is a new, so you should know about this. In terms of fauna, it has tigers, leopards, sloth bears, gores, sambal deers, etc. And in terms of flora, it has moist, deciduous vegetation and some evergreen species as well. Example, the rare Ashoka tree with peculiar saffron colored flowers. Okay, so this is another news, and let's next move to the next news, which is two-factor authentication. And this was a very interesting news which came in today's The Hindu newspaper. It talked about how the two-factor authentication system works in a practical way. And here we need to understand first what exactly is two-factor authentication and why it is required and what is some of the basic way in which it operates. So what exactly is two-factor authentication? It essentially is a way for us to identify identity and access management security method that requires two forms of identification to access resources and data. For example, if you want to access your Gmail or any YouTube videos or things like that, and maybe you are logging from some other device, then the device will first ask you for your password, which is the first level of authentication. Secondly, it will also ask you to enter something called OTP or one-time password. That part is also called as two-factor authentication, and this essentially makes for a better safety and security of your identity. Right, so it has basically, it combines two of the three factors, that is something you know, which is password, something you have, which is phone or any token, and then something you are, that is biometric. Essentially, when you log into your Apple phones or iPhones, so essentially you are supposed to enter through your retina scan, or maybe your face scan is done. So this essentially is part of biometrics. Then examples can be OTP codes, you have Google Authenticator applications, security keys, fingerprint scan, etc. So if you look at how it works, so it works in the mechanism where you have a secure uh, password or security key is given along with time. So this thing, both of them are combined in a very complex web of algorithms, and there is a lot of procedures and algorithm that keeps into picture. And one of the key thing which the Hindu had mentioned was interestingly about the XOR mechanism, XOR, right? So generally what happens, so this is essentially a part of truth table. So, and there are like AND gates and OR gates. So AND gets activated when both inputs are there. For example, if I have two input gates, A and B, or think of this as a password or two factors authentication. This is the first factor and this is the second factor. Okay, so we know that OTP has to get activated only if both of first the key has to be released, and secondly it is released in a specific time. So both of them acts as an input, and finally you have a result which checks whether it is correct or not. So for this, what is used is XOR framework, XOR, which basically means exclusive OR. OR means either A or B, both needs to be active. If both are active, then it will not work, right? So here either 1 or 0, then it will be 1, 0, 1, it will be 1. If it is 0, 0, it will be 0. If it is 1, 1, again it will be 0. So again, no need to understand this whole thing, but understand that it uses a complex algorithm to basically figure out the whole security infrastructure. What are the benefits? Benefits are it reduces risk of account breaches, phishing, identity theft. Even if passwords are compromised, still there is another way in which you can protect your account. Fine. Next, cholesterol. So scientists from INST Mohali, which is Institute for Nanoscience and Technology, have introduced cholesterol-based nanomaterials for future quantum technologies and spintronic application. Essentially, it means that all the data storage devices or quantum computers can utilize cholesterol-based nanomaterials, right? So if we understand what exactly is the meaning of cholesterol, that will make more sense in the news. So first, what is cholesterol? It is essentially a waxy fat-like lipid belonging to the steroid family. It is produced by liver and obtained also from the animal-based foods such as butter, such as clarified butter or ghee, or even from meat or milk, right? Then what are the two types of cholesterol? So just like you have good terrorist and bad terrorist, we have good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. You have low density lipoprotein, which is called LDL or bad cholesterol. It can build in the arteries, right? And essentially we want to keep this as low as possible. Then we have high density lipoprotein, which is called HDL or good cholesterol. It helps remove the excess LDL. So we want this to be on a higher side. What are the functions of cholesterol? So cholesterol are essential for hormone production. It is essential for vitamin D synthesis and especially for building cell membranes. So it is essential that we consume a healthy dosage of cholesterol is always a good thing. At the same time, if it exceeds a certain limit, it can have a very detrimental impact on our health. And these can be including if high HDL leads to increased risk of heart disease and stroke. Okay, so this is all about news today for 9th of September. So keep watching this initiative and complete the test discussion or complete the questions that will be putting up on the screen. So thank you and all the best.